Zeus stopped breathing normally before Ryan even saw her. The German shepherd had been pressed against the cage door for 4 straight minutes. Not barking, just pushing. Low whine trapped in his throat like something he could not release. Ryan almost ignored it. He had learned over 2 years to trust the dog completely. But the highway was empty, and the blizzard was swallowing everything, and there was nothing out there. Then the headlights caught the shape in the snow. A person, face down, not moving. And beside her, refusing to leave her side, a dog pressing its entire body against hers in the dark. Someone had chained a human being to the frozen ground and left her there to die. If this story matters to you, please subscribe right now and follow along until the very last word. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Ryan Cole had been a patrol officer for 2 years, and he already knew that the worst calls were never the ones that came in over the radio. The worst ones were the ones you almost drove past. He was 25 years old, 2 years out of the academy, assigned to a mountain highway corridor in Colorado that most of the department treated as a punishment post. Too remote, too quiet, too far from anything that mattered. Ryan had asked for it specifically. He liked the quiet. He liked the long stretches of empty road and the way the mountains made the rest of the world feel like it was someone else's problem. He had grown up in a small town 40 miles south, had joined the force right out of college, and had spent most of his adult life being told he was too young to understand how things worked. He understood plenty. Zeus was in the back cage, 4 years old, German shepherd, tan and black coat, 68 pounds of training and instinct, and a bond with Ryan that had taken 14 months of daily work to build and would last the rest of both their lives. They had been partnered since Zeus was 18 months old. Ryan had never worked a shift without him. Zeus had been restless since mile marker 42. Not aggressive restless, not the hard bark and body slam against the cage that meant a threat was close. Something different. A low, sustained pressure against the cage door, nose working fast, a whine that kept starting and stopping like the dog could not decide whether to commit to it. "What is it?" Ryan said. Zeus pressed harder against the cage. Ryan slowed the cruiser without fully deciding to. The road was bad. Visibility was dropping fast, the kind of mountain blizzard that builds a wall in front of your headlights and dares you to push through it. Smart driving said keep moving. Get to the checkpoint. Get off the mountain before the road closed. Zeus made the decision for him. The whine became something else. Something with urgency in it that Ryan had only heard twice before, both times when they were working a search, and the dog knew exactly where the trail ended. Ryan pulled to the shoulder and stopped. He sat for 3 seconds, looking through the windshield at the white nothing beyond his headlights. Then he opened the door. The cold hit him like a wall. He pulled his jacket tighter and clicked on his flashlight and swept it left toward the tree line. The beam caught something at the edge of the snowdrift, a shape that was too large to be debris and too still to be anything alive. He moved toward it, slow at first, then faster as the shape resolved itself out of the white and became a person. A woman, face down in the snow. Military camouflage pants and jacket, the fabric dark with moisture. Her right arm was extended outward at an angle that looked wrong, and as Ryan dropped to one knee beside her, he saw why. A chain, not handcuffs. A logging chain, the kind used to drag down timber, padlocked around her left wrist and running down through the snow to a steel post driven into the frozen ground. Ryan put 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse. Faint and slow, but there. "Hey," he said loudly. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. He reached for his radio. 1 bar. Then none. The mountain had eaten the signal completely. He looked back at his cruiser 30 yards away. No bolt cutters. He had reported the missing equipment 2 weeks ago. The replacement had not come in yet. He looked back at the woman. And then something moved. On the other side of her body, pressed tight against her left flank, was a dog. A German shepherd, female, smaller than Zeus, her tan and black coat stiff with ice. She had been so still that Ryan had not seen her in the dark. She raised her head now and looked directly at him. And what was in her eyes was not aggression and not fear. It was something closer to a question. Ryan held out his hand, palm up, slow. The dog looked at his hand, then looked at the woman, then looked back at Ryan. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm going to help her. You have to let me." The dog lowered her head back to the woman's side, but kept her eyes on Ryan. He pulled his flashlight over the woman's body, looking for injuries he could treat right now, looking for anything that would tell him how long she had been here. Her skin was cold in a way that meant hours, not minutes. Her lips had gone pale, but her chest was still moving. He swept the light to her left arm. The chain was tight at the wrist, not loose. Whoever had put it there had not been in a hurry. This had been done with intention. Ryan stood and ran back to the cruiser. He was already thinking through every piece of equipment in the trunk. No bolt cutters, but he had a tow strap rated for 3 tons and a hitch receiver. The post in the ground was steel, but it was in frozen earth, and frozen earth in a blizzard that had been falling for 6 hours was not the same as concrete. He drove the cruiser off the shoulder and across the snow-covered ground, backing it toward the post with his door open, shouting coordinates he was not sure anyone could hear into his radio. He looped the tow strap around the chain near the post, connected it to the hitch, and hit the gas. The engine strained, the tires slipped. Ryan pushed the accelerator harder. The post tore free with a sound like a gunshot. Ryan was out of the cruiser before the engine stopped rocking. He got to the woman and crouched beside her again. The chain was still on her wrist, but it was free from the ground. He gathered the slack in his hands and looked at the dog. She had not moved from the woman's side. "Okay," Ryan said. He slid both arms under the woman, one under her shoulders and one under her knees, and lifted. She was lighter than she should have been. He carried her to the cruiser and got the back door open with his elbow, and laid her across the back seat as carefully as he could manage. The dog followed him the entire way, sat beside the cruiser door, and looked up at him. Ryan stared at her for 1 second. Then he opened the front passenger door and looked at her. "Get in." She jumped in without hesitation. Ryan got behind the wheel and drove. He had the heater at maximum within 30 seconds and was pushing the cruiser down the mountain at the fastest speed the road could tolerate. Zeus was pressing against his cage divider, not barking, just watching the female dog in the front seat with an intensity Ryan could feel through the metal. "Easy," Ryan said. "Both of you. Easy." He grabbed his radio and tried again. 1 bar appeared and disappeared. He tried the phone. No signal. 40 minutes to the nearest clinic. He kept his eyes on the road, and his right hand reached back to check the woman's pulse at intervals. Still there, still thin. It was on the 3rd check that his flashlight, propped on the center console, caught the sleeve of her jacket where it had ridden up above the wrist chain. Ryan took his eyes off the road for exactly 2 seconds. That was all it took to see the tattoo. A trident. Navy SEAL trident, inked on the inside of her right wrist, small and precise, the kind of mark you put somewhere permanent when you have earned something permanent. Ryan put his eyes back on the road. He had heard that the Navy had recently integrated female operators into certain special warfare pipelines. Classified programs. Nothing official in the press. The kind of thing you heard from a cousin who knew a recruiter who had said too much at a bar in Virginia Beach. He had never thought about what that would look like in real life until 30 seconds ago, when he had lifted a frozen woman in military camouflage off a mountain road in a blizzard, and she weighed nothing, and the chain on her wrist had been locked with a purpose. The woman made a sound. Ryan's head snapped to the rearview mirror. Her eyes were open, not focused, moving slowly across the ceiling of the cruiser, the way eyes move when the brain is trying to locate itself. "Hey," Ryan said immediately. "You're in a police cruiser. You're safe. I'm Officer Cole. Can you hear me?" Her eyes moved to the mirror, found his face, stayed there. Her mouth opened. "Don't," he said. "Don't try to talk. Save it." Her mouth moved anyway. Ryan leaned slightly toward the back without taking his eyes off the road. 4 words, barely above a breath, but clear. "Don't let them find." Then her eyes closed. Ryan gripped the wheel. Don't let them find what? Don't let who find? Find her? Find the dog? Find something she was carrying? He looked at the female dog in the passenger seat. She was sitting completely upright, facing forward, watching the road the same way Zeus watched the road when they were running toward something. Not like a stray, not like a frightened animal that had been surviving in the cold. Like a dog that had been trained, trusted with something important, and had not stopped doing her job. Ryan reached over and pushed the dog's collar sideways with one finger. A tag, military spec, stamped with a unit designation that meant nothing to him yet, but would. His eyes went back to the road. The mountain was still going down, and the blizzard was still building, and the clinic was still 30 minutes away, and the woman in his back seat was still barely breathing. And somewhere behind them, in the dark above the tree line, whatever she had been warning him about was either real or it was not. Ryan pressed the accelerator down and drove like it was real. Because the one thing 2 years of patrol work had taught him was that the people who said, "Don't let them find," had already learned firsthand exactly what those people were capable of. And he was not going to let her down now. Zeus pushed against the cage divider and did not stop. The clinic doors did not open fast enough. Ryan had the woman in his arms before the cruiser fully stopped, shouldering through the entrance with the chain still trailing from her wrist, because he had not found a way to remove it, and was not going to waste another second trying. Kira came through the door right behind him. Nobody stopped the dog. Something in the way she moved made people step aside instead. The night nurse took one look at the chain and did not ask a single question. She just called back for a gurney and pointed Ryan down the hall. "What happened?" the attending physician said, already moving alongside him. Dr. Patricia Ewan, 50s, the kind of calm that came from years of seeing things go wrong and choosing to focus instead on what could still go right. "Found her chained to a post on the mountain highway. Blizzard exposure. I don't know how long she was out there. Hours, minimum." Ryan laid the woman down on the gurney. She regained consciousness briefly in the cruiser, said something, then went out again. Pulse has been weak the whole drive. "Does she have ID on her?" "Military camouflage uniform. No visible ID. She has a Navy trident tattoo on her right wrist." Dr. Ewan looked at the tattoo. Something moved across her face briefly and was put away. "All right, give us room." Ryan stepped back. He stood in the hallway outside the treatment room with his back against the wall and his hands still cold from the mountain, and looked down at Kira. The dog had positioned herself directly in front of the treatment room door, not blocking it, just there, facing it. She had not looked away from that door since they came through the entrance. Ryan crouched down beside her. She's going to be okay. Kira did not look at him. He sat down on the floor with his back against the wall and waited. Zeus was still in the cruiser. Ryan had cracked the windows, and the heat was running on the engine timer. But he knew the dog was watching the clinic entrance, and had been since the moment Ryan carried the woman inside. He would check on Zeus in 20 minutes. Right now, he could not make himself move farther than 10 feet from this door. The chain had been cut off in the treatment room. Ryan could hear equipment moving, voices staying low and controlled the way medical voices do when the situation is serious but not yet lost. He counted the sounds without meaning to. The rhythm of a monitor, a cart being wheeled, someone asking for a specific number that meant nothing to Ryan, but seemed to mean something to everyone in that room. 32 minutes passed. Dr. Ewan came out. Ryan was on his feet before the door finished opening. "She's stable," Dr. Ewan said. "Core temperature is coming up. We've got her on fluids, and she's breathing on her own consistently now." She paused. "She's going to live." Ryan exhaled. It came out longer than he expected, like his body had been holding it the entire drive down the mountain. "What's her condition beyond the hypothermia?" he asked. Dr. Ewan looked at him carefully. "That's what I need to talk to you about." She glanced at the hallway, then back at Ryan. "Her hypothermia is real, and it was severe. But her other injuries tell a different story." "What other injuries?" "2 bruised ribs, consistent with blunt force restraint, not a fall. There's bruising on both forearms that is patterned, not from the chain on her wrist. These are older, 2 to 3 days at minimum." She kept her voice level and professional, but her eyes were direct. "Officer Cole, someone held this woman down before they chained her out there. The exposure was not the first thing they did to her." Ryan's jaw tightened. "She has been out there more than one night," Dr. Ewan said. The hallway was quiet for a moment. "2 nights," Ryan said. Not a question, working it out loud. "Possibly. Given the hypothermia progression and the older bruising pattern, I believe she was restrained elsewhere first, then moved to that location." Dr. Ewan folded her arms. "She survived 2 nights in a mountain blizzard in below-zero temperatures." Ryan looked at Kira, who had not moved from the door. "Because of the dog," he said. Dr. Ewan nodded once. "Body heat. If that animal stayed pressed against her the entire time, and from the condition of the dog's coat, I believe she did, that is the margin. That is why she is alive." Ryan looked at Kira for a long moment. The dog's eyes were still fixed on the door, waiting, holding her position with the discipline of an animal that had been trained to stay on task and had decided that this task was not finished yet. "Can I see her?" Ryan asked. "Not yet. She needs another hour minimum before I want her talking." Dr. Ewan paused. "But there is something else." She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a small evidence bag. Inside it was a thin metal tag, rectangular, stamped. This was on the dog's collar. The collar itself is military issue. The tag has a unit designation I don't recognize, and a serial number. Ryan took the bag and looked at the tag through the plastic. He recognized the format. He had seen military working dog tags before, during a joint training exercise 2 years ago. The serial number structure was DOD issue. The unit designation was a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to him on its own. "I'm going to run this," he said. He went to the cruiser. Zeus pressed his nose through the cracked window, and Ryan put his hand against it for 2 seconds, a brief contact that said, "I'm here, and I see you," before he got inside and pulled up the federal law enforcement database on his laptop. He entered the tag number. The system took 11 seconds, Usually it took 2. Then a response came back that Ryan had never seen before in 2 years of running queries. The record existed. There was a file. But it was flagged with a classification marker that locked his access level out of the full record. What he could see was a single line of summary data, the kind that appeared when a file existed but was not meant to be read by anyone below a certain clearance. Military working dog. Unit designation confirmed. Handler. Classified. Status. Killed in action. Date. 14 months ago. Ryan read it twice. Then he read it a third time. Killed in action. He looked at the clinic entrance where Kira was sitting on the other side of the door, very much alive, waiting for a woman she had kept breathing through 2 nights in a blizzard. He went back inside. He sat on the floor next to Kira and did not say anything. His mind was working through it methodically, the way it worked through things when emotion was trying to push ahead of logic, and he needed logic to go first. A military working dog, officially listed as dead 14 months ago. Alive. In a mountain corridor in Colorado, chained alongside a female Navy SEAL who had been held and then deliberately left to die in the snow. Who had regained consciousness for 4 seconds and said, "Don't let them find." The dog was not supposed to exist, which meant someone had a reason to make sure she did not. "Hey." Ryan looked at Kira. "What are you carrying?" Kira turned her head and looked at him for the first time since they had come inside. Full eye contact, direct and steady, the kind a well-trained working dog held when it was confirming a bond rather than responding to a command. Then she turned back to the door. Ryan was still sitting with that when Dr. Ewan came back out just after 4 in the morning and said the woman was awake and asking for the dog first. Ryan stood and opened the treatment room door. Kira walked in without rushing. She crossed to the bed and placed her front paws on the edge and pressed her nose against the woman's hand. And the woman, pale and connected to 2 different monitors, with her wrist wrapped where the chain had been, put both hands on either side of the dog's face and pressed her forehead against Kira's, and said nothing. Ryan stood in the doorway and gave them 30 seconds. Then he pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. "I'm Officer Ryan Cole," he said. "You're at Mountain Pass Emergency Clinic. You're safe right now. Can you tell me your name?" She looked at him. Dark eyes, alert despite the exhaustion behind them, the kind of alert that came from training rather than rest. She was 22 at most. She looked like someone who had been through something and was already calculating what came next. "Sarah," she said. Her voice was rough but controlled. "Sarah Voss." "Sarah, do you know what day it is?" "Thursday," she paused. "Or Friday. I lost one." "It's Friday. Early morning." Ryan kept his voice steady. "Can you tell me what happened to you?" She looked at the ceiling for a moment. Kira had settled against her side on the bed, and Sarah's hand had found the back of the dog's neck without her seeming to think about it. "I was on leave," she said. "Solo camping trip. Mountain corridor, about 12 miles north of where you found me." She stopped. "They came at night. I heard them too late." "How many?" 3. She said it without hesitation. The number was already in a file somewhere in her mind, organized and accessible. They were professional, not law enforcement, private. "Did you recognize any of them?" "No." Her jaw tightened slightly. "But they knew who I was. They used my rank. They knew my unit designation." She turned her head and looked directly at Ryan. "They knew about Kira." Ryan held her gaze. "What do you mean they knew about Kira?" Sarah was quiet for 3 seconds, measuring something. "Kira is not supposed to be alive," she finally said. "Officially. She was listed KIA 14 months ago, during an operation her handler was running." She paused. "Her handler was my closest friend in the service. His name was Corporal James Weir. He died in what was reported as a training accident." Ryan did not react outwardly. He just listened. "James found something," Sarah said. "Inside the contracting operation attached to our unit. Financial fraud. Significant enough that people with authority were making sure it stayed buried." She looked at Kira. "The night before he died, he told me he had found proof. Physical documentation. He said if anything happened to him, I would know what to do." "What happened to him?" "An explosion, training exercise. Officially an accident involving improperly stored ordnance." Her voice stayed flat and careful, the way someone's voice sounds when they have said the words enough times that emotion no longer has direct access to them. Kira was listed as killed in the same incident, but she was not with him at the site. She had been with me the night before. I never corrected the record. Ryan leaned forward slightly. "Why not?" Sarah looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, the first crack in the composure. "Because James told me to keep her," she said quietly. "He said, if something happens, keep Kira safe. He said she would tell me everything I needed to know when the time was right." Ryan looked at the dog. Kira looked back at him. "Sarah," he kept his voice low, "what is Kira carrying?" Sarah held his gaze for a long moment. Then she reached over and touched the collar around Kira's neck. She ran her fingers along the inside edge of the lining, the seam that ran under the buckle. "James sewed something into this collar the night before he died," she said. "I didn't open it. I didn't know if I should. I kept waiting for the right moment, and then I kept not being in the right position to do anything with it safely." Her voice dropped. "But whoever came for me on that mountain knew it existed. They knew what they were looking for." Ryan stood. He went to the window and looked at the parking lot. Still empty, still dark. The blizzard had eased to a steady fall. He went back to the chair. "Sarah," he said, "is there anyone in your command structure you trust right now?" She answered without hesitating. "No." The word landed in the room like something that had been dropped from a significant height. Ryan pulled out his phone. He had one federal contact. He had turned down a task force invitation from her 18 months ago because the timing was wrong and the assignment was out of state. He had not called her since. He looked at the name in his contacts for a long moment. Then he looked at Kira. The dog was watching him. Steady. Patient. The way she had watched him since the mountain. With the focused trust of an animal that had been waiting for someone who knew what to do next. Ryan thought of what Sarah had said. "James told me she would tell me everything when the time was right." He looked at the collar, at the seam under the buckle that had not been opened. "Not yet," he said quietly, mostly to himself. Because whatever was in that collar had already gotten James Weir killed, and Sarah Voss chained to a mountain post in a blizzard. And Ryan was not going to open it until he knew who was watching. Zeus barked once from the parking lot, sharp and alert. Ryan was at the window in 3 steps. A vehicle had turned into the clinic lot. Dark. No markings. Moving slowly, the way vehicles move when they are not in a hurry, because they already know where they are going. Ryan looked back at Sarah. Her eyes had already found the window. "They found us," she said. Ryan did not wait to see who got out of the vehicle. He moved back to Sarah's bedside in 4 steps and kept his voice low. "Can you walk?" "Yes." She was already pushing herself upright, jaw tight against the pain from her ribs. "Don't argue with me about what I'm about to do." "I'm not arguing with anyone," she said. "Just move." He went to the hallway and found Dr. Ewan at the nursing station. "I need you to listen to me carefully," he said. "There is a vehicle in your parking lot that should not be here. I need you to lock the treatment wing and not allow anyone back there without my direct authorization. Not federal ID, not law enforcement credentials. Nobody. Not until I tell you otherwise. Doctor. Yuen looked at him for exactly 1 second. All right. If anyone asks, the patient was transferred. You don't know where. She nodded and picked up the phone. Ryan went back to the treatment room. Sarah had her feet on the floor and was working through the pain of standing with the focused expression of someone who had been trained to treat physical discomfort as information rather than instruction. Kira was beside her, pressed against her left leg. There's a supply corridor in the back, Ryan said. Connects to the ambulance bay. We go there, we stay there until I know what we're dealing with. And if it's what I think it is, Sarah said, then we deal with it from a position where they can't reach you without going through me first. They moved. The supply corridor was narrow and cold and smelled like industrial cleaner and latex. Sarah moved slower than she wanted to. Ryan could see her working through each step, but she did not stop, and she did not ask for help. Kira stayed tight against her left side the entire way, matching her pace exactly, the way a well-trained working dog holds position when her partner is injured. Ryan cracked the ambulance bay door an inch and looked out. The dark vehicle had parked near the entrance. 2 men were getting out, both in civilian clothing, both moving with the kind of economy that came from training, not aggression. Controlled and deliberate. Men who were used to walking into situations and having them resolved the way they intended. One of them was already on his phone. Ryan let the door close. 2 of them, he said. Did you see their credentials? Not yet. You will, Sarah said. They'll have federal ID. It'll look right. It will be real in the sense that it was issued by a legitimate office. She paused. But the office itself is not what it appears to be. Ryan looked at her. James found that too, she said quietly. There's a contracting layer between the unit and the DoD that has been running for 6 years. On paper, it's a logistics and training support contractor. In practice, it's a financial pipeline. Money coming in through defense contracts, moving through 3 shell accounts, and coming out clean on the other side. She kept her voice flat and methodical. James estimated the value at over $40 million over 6 years. Ryan absorbed that. The men who came for me, she said. They're not rogue operators. They work for the contractor. They have access to federal systems because the contractor has DoD clearance. They can generate credentials. They can access personnel files. They can make phone calls that get answered. She looked at the door. And they have been watching me for 3 months. I just didn't know how closely. A knock at the treatment wing entrance. Ryan heard it from the corridor. Then a voice, professional and even, speaking to someone at the nursing station. He pressed the door open 1 inch again and listened. Federal officers, the voice said. We have a report of an injured service member brought in tonight. We need to verify her status and arrange transport. Dr. Yuen's voice came back without hesitation. I'm sorry. We had a patient matching that description earlier, but she was transferred about 20 minutes ago. I don't have the destination in my paperwork yet. A pause. Transferred where? I would have to check with the attending. She stepped out. If you want to leave a number, I can have her call you. Ryan let the door close. He turned to Sarah and said nothing. She had heard it too. They're not going to leave, she said. No, Ryan agreed. They're going to check the parking lot for my cruiser. When they find it, they're going to know I'm still here. He thought for 2 seconds. I need to make a call. He pulled out his phone and found the contact he had been looking at an hour ago. Agent Diana Marsh, FBI, Denver Field Office. He pressed call and put the phone to his ear and counted the rings. She answered on the 3rd ring, which, at 4:30 in the morning, meant either she was already awake or she slept the way people slept when they had learned that important calls did not wait for business hours. Marsh, this is Ryan Cole, Colorado Highway Patrol, Mountain Corridor Unit. We met 18 months ago when you were recruiting for the Joint Task Force. I said no. A pause. I remember you. What's wrong? I need 3 minutes, and I need you to stay on the line after I'm done talking. Go. He gave it to her in exactly 3 minutes. Sarah Voss, the chain, the mountain, Kira, the deceased status, James Weir, the collar, the 2 men currently in the clinic lobby with credentials he could not verify. He did not editorialize. He did not ask for a response until he was finished. When he stopped talking, Marsh was quiet for 4 seconds. Stay where you are, she said. Do not let them take the dog. Do not open the collar until I am on site. I am calling the field office director right now, and I will be in a vehicle in 10 minutes. I can be there in under 2 hours. I have 2 men between me and the exit. I know. Keep this line open. Don't disconnect. Her voice shifted slightly. Cole? Yeah? You said the dog is officially listed as KIA? That's what the database returned. Then whoever killed that record has access to DoD personnel systems at a level that is not field grade. This is not a local problem. She paused. You understand what I'm telling you? I understand. Good. Stay on the line. Ryan held the phone against his chest, speaker on low, and looked at Sarah. FBI is coming, he said. How long? 2 hours. She looked at the door. That's a long 2 hours. It is, he agreed. He pressed the ambulance bay door open again and looked out at his cruiser. Zeus was watching the clinic entrance from the back cage, body rigid, ears fully forward. The dog had not taken his eyes off the entrance since the unmarked vehicle arrived. One of the 2 men had moved around the side of the building, coming toward the ambulance bay. Ryan let the door close and turned to Sarah. They're splitting up. They're sweeping the perimeter, she said. Standard confirmation pattern. If they find the cruiser, they'll know the dog is still inside. She paused. They want Kira. That's the priority for them. I'm secondary. Ryan looked at Kira. The dog was sitting between him and Sarah, facing the door, perfectly still. In the dim light of the corridor, Ryan could see the collar clearly for the first time since they had come inside. Standard military working dog collar, dark nylon, the kind designed to take punishment and not show it. The seam along the inside edge of the buckle panel was sewn with a slightly different thread. You would not notice it unless you were looking. James Weir had been careful. Sarah, Ryan said, the men who came for you on the mountain, did they try to take the collar before they chained you out there? She was quiet for a moment. Yes. What happened? Kira didn't let them. She said it simply, without drama. They had me down. She was not restrained. One of them tried to grab her, and she took his hand. They decided the exposure would handle both of us, and they left rather than escalate. Ryan looked at Kira with a new clarity. The dog had not just stayed beside Sarah to share body heat. She had made herself impossible to remove. She had known, in whatever way a trained working dog knows the things that matter, that what she was carrying was worth protecting with everything she had. The ambulance bay door handle moved. Ryan stepped directly in front of it. The door pushed open, and the man on the other side stopped when he found Ryan Cole standing 18 inches in front of him, with his badge in one hand and his phone in the other, and an expression that was entirely calm and not remotely welcoming. Officer Cole, the man said. He did not look surprised. He had the practiced steadiness of someone who had anticipated this exact configuration and had prepared a response for it. My name is Agent Harmon. I'm with the Federal Protective Services Division. He produced an ID wallet and held it open. Ryan looked at it without touching it. The photo matched. The badge format looked correct. The issuing office was printed in standard federal type. "What division?" Ryan said. "Federal Protective Services. We've been notified of an injured service member transported to this facility. We're here to ensure her safety and arrange proper transport." "She's not here." "Your cruiser is in the parking lot, Officer Cole." "My cruiser is in the parking lot," Ryan agreed. "That's where I parked it." The man held his gaze. Something moved in his expression. Not aggression, not yet, but the controlled shift of a person recalibrating an approach. "I understand you may have concerns," the man said. "That's appropriate. But I want to be clear with you. The service member you transported tonight is involved in an active federal matter. Anything that was found with her, any personal property, any equipment, needs to be secured through proper federal channels immediately." He paused. "That is for her protection as much as anything else." Ryan heard the word equipment and knew exactly what it meant. "Do you have a warrant?" Ryan said. "This is a federal protective action. We don't require a warrant for immediate threat assessment and transport." "You require a warrant to take property," Ryan said, "including any property found on or near the subject." The man looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then he smiled. It was the smile of someone who had encountered resistance before and had learned that patience was a more effective tool than force when witnesses were present. "Officer Cole," he said quietly, "I want you to think carefully about your next decision. You are a county patrol officer. What you are currently involved in operates at a level that is well above your jurisdiction. There are people who will appreciate your cooperation tonight, and there are consequences for people who make this more complicated than it needs to be." He paused. "I am giving you the opportunity to make the right choice." Ryan looked at him for a long moment. Then he raised the phone to his ear. "Marsh," he said, "I need you to identify yourself to the individual currently in front of me." He turned the phone around and held it toward the man. From the speaker, clearly and without hesitation, came Diana Marsh's voice. "This is Senior Special Agent Diana Marsh, FBI Denver Field Office, badge number 4471. I am currently the supervising federal authority on this matter, and I have instructed Officer Cole to maintain custody of all persons and property on site pending my arrival. Any attempt to remove persons or property before that arrival constitutes federal obstruction. Am I clear?" The man stared at the phone. Then he looked at Ryan, and for the first time since he had come through that door, the smooth, professional certainty in his face developed a crack. "Tell your partner inside to step back from the nursing station," Ryan said. "And then both of you are going to wait in the parking lot where I can see you. Because the FBI is coming, and everyone is going to want a clear account of exactly where you were and what you were doing for the next 2 hours." The man said nothing for a long moment. Then he stepped back through the door. Ryan held it open with one hand and watched him walk away. He let out a breath and turned back to Sarah and Kira. Sarah was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, ribs aching, watching him with an expression that was equal parts exhaustion and something that might have been relief if she had allowed herself to fully feel it. "You held your ground," she said. "For now," Ryan said. 2 hours is still 2 hours. He sat down on the floor of the corridor and put his back against the wall. Kira walked over and sat beside him. He looked at the collar, at the seam that James Weir had sewn with careful hands the night before he died. He put his hand on the dog's back and felt her breathe. Whatever was in that collar had survived 2 nights in a blizzard, 3 men on a mountain, and 1 very long night in a supply corridor. It was going to survive 2 more hours. The 2 hours did not pass quietly. At 40 minutes, The man who had introduced himself as Agent Harmon knocked on the ambulance bay door again. Ryan opened it 6 inches and did not move from the gap. "We'd like to check on the patient's condition," Harmon said. His voice was still professional, still patient, but something underneath it had shifted in a way that Ryan could not name precisely and did not need to. He had been reading people in difficult situations for 2 years. The patient's was now effort rather than instinct. "The patient is resting," Ryan said. "You'll have your conversation with the FBI when they arrive." "Officer Cole, I want to remind you that obstructing a federal protective action carries significant professional consequences." "I want to remind you," Ryan said, "that I have been on the phone with the FBI field office director for the last 40 minutes, and this entire conversation is being recorded." He paused. "Is there anything else?" Harmon looked at him for 3 seconds. Then he stepped back. Ryan closed the door. He turned around. Sarah was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall and Kira's head in her lap. She had not slept. Her eyes were open and tracking, and her hand was moving slowly along Kira's back in the automatic way people touch animals when they are managing something they cannot put down. "He's going to try again before Marsh gets here," Sarah said. "I know." "They may have more people coming." "Probably." Ryan sat down across from her and looked at the collar. "Sarah, I need to understand something before Marsh arrives." The collar. She looked at it. "James told you Kira would tell you everything when the time was right," Ryan said. "You said you never opened it, but you knew what was in there." She was quiet for a moment. "I knew what he told me the night before he died. He said there was documentation, financial records, communication logs, enough to trace the money from the contractor accounts back to 4 specific individuals inside the DoD procurement office." She paused. "He also said there was a recording." "A recording of what?" "A meeting," she said. 6 weeks before he died, James was called into an informal meeting with his unit commander and 2 men he had never seen before. He described them as contractor liaisons. They told him directly that his financial inquiries into unit contracting had been noted and needed to stop. They did not threaten him explicitly. They did not have to. She looked at Kira. James recorded the entire meeting on his phone. He said the names in that recording were the piece that mattered most. Because names attached to voices attached to a direct conversation about burying evidence was something that financial records alone could not provide. Ryan felt the weight of that settle in the room. "He knew they were going to kill him," Ryan said. She did not answer immediately. "He was not surprised when it happened," she finally said. "I think that is the closest I can get to saying it." The ambulance bay door handle moved again. Ryan was on his feet and at the door before it completed the motion. But this time, the door opened from someone pushing through it from the outside, with the specific authority of someone who did not wait for permission. A woman in her late 40s, dark jacket, FBI credentials already in her hand before Ryan could speak. Behind her, 2 additional agents. Diana Marsh looked exactly like her voice on the phone, direct, composed, and moving at a pace that meant every second was already allocated. "Cole," she said. "Marsh." She looked past him at Sarah, then at Kira, then back at Ryan. "The 2 men outside?" "Harmon and an unidentified partner, in the parking lot. They've been there for the last hour and 40 minutes. We passed them on the way in. They're being detained for questioning." She moved into the corridor and crouched down to eye level with Sarah in a single smooth motion, the way someone crouches when they want to reduce the power dynamic, and mean it. "Sarah Voss?" "Yes." "I've been briefed on what Officer Cole told me. I need to ask you directly. Are you physically stable enough to have this conversation right now?" Sarah looked at her steadily. "Yes." "Good." Marsh stood. "The collar." Ryan moved to Kira. The dog watched him approach and held still as he reached for the collar. He turned the buckle panel over and found the seam. He looked at Sarah. She gave him a single nod. He used his thumbnail to work along the stitching. It took 40 seconds. The thread was tight and even, the work of someone who had taken their time with it. When the panel came open, a small plastic sleeve fell into his palm. Inside it, a micro SD card, no larger than his thumbnail, wrapped in a piece of electrical tape to keep it dry. Ryan held it in his palm and looked at it. Something that a man had died to hide. That a dog had carried for 14 months through everything. That 2 nights in a Colorado blizzard had not taken. That 3 men on a mountain had failed to find. He handed it to Marsh. She took it without ceremony and passed it immediately to one of the agents behind her, who had a laptop open and a card reader already attached. The 3 of them watched without speaking while the agent inserted the card and waited for the files to load. It took 22 seconds. Then the agent looked up at Marsh. "It's intact," he said. "Financial records, communication logs, and 2 audio files." Marsh looked at the screen. Ryan watched her read. Her expression did not change the way a civilian's expression changed when they saw something significant. It changed the way a trained investigator's expression changed, which was almost not at all, except for a single tightening around the eyes that lasted less than 2 seconds. "How many names?" Marsh said. "4 in the financial records, 2 additional in the audio." The agent paused. "One of the audio files is a meeting recording, 23 minutes. Play the first 30 seconds. The agent pressed play. The recording quality was clear. A room, chairs, the ambient sound of an office building. Then James Weir's voice, younger than Ryan had imagined it, calm and precise, running a verbal timestamp at the beginning, the way someone did when they wanted to establish the date and location for a record. Then another voice, older, authoritative, a voice that belonged to someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Ryan did not recognize it. Marsh stopped the playback after 30 seconds and looked at the screen. Then she looked at her agent. Something passed between them that Ryan could not read. "Get the field office director on the line," she said. "Right now." The agent stepped out of the corridor. Marsh turned to Ryan. "The voice in that recording." She kept her words measured and careful. "You would not recognize the name, but it belongs to a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense who currently oversees procurement contracting for 4 active military theater operations." Ryan heard the words, arranged them, understood what they meant. "This is not a field-grade cover-up," he said. "No," Marsh said. "It is not." Sarah had not moved from the floor. She was listening to everything with her hand resting on Kira's back, and her face holding the expression of someone receiving confirmation of something they had known and had been carrying alone for a very long time. "James knew how high it went?" Ryan said to her. "He suspected," she said. "He did not have the name, but he knew it was not something that could be handled inside the military chain." She looked at Marsh. "That's why he gave it to Kira. He knew the military chain was compromised. But a dog listed as dead and a patrol officer on a mountain road in Colorado? That was outside every system they were watching." Marsh looked at Kira. The dog looked back at her. "He trusted the right variables," Marsh said quietly. It was not exactly a compliment. It was more like a professional acknowledgement of a plan that had worked under impossible conditions. Ryan's phone buzzed, a number he did not recognize. He looked at Marsh. "Answer it," she said. He answered. The voice was male, formal, with a specific cadence of someone reading from a prepared statement. "Officer Cole, this is the office of the Colorado State Attorney General. We've been contacted by the FBI Denver field office regarding an active matter in your jurisdiction. We are asking you to confirm your current location and the status of the evidence in your custody." Ryan looked at Marsh. She nodded. He confirmed both. "Thank you, Officer Cole. You are requested to maintain your current position. Federal and state prosecutors are being briefed as we speak. This is now a jointly managed federal matter." The call ended. Ryan set the phone down. Something had shifted in the last 4 minutes that he could feel, but not fully articulate. The corridor was the same. The people in it were the same. But the weight of what was in that laptop had reorganized the entire shape of the night, the way a single piece of information reorganizes everything built around the absence of it. Sarah felt it too. He could see it in the way she exhaled. "It's real now," she said. Not to anyone specifically, to the fact of it. "It was always real," Ryan said. "I know," she said. "But real and documented are two different things. James knew that better than anyone." Ryan crouched down in front of Kira and put both hands on the dog's face, thumbs resting lightly along her jaw. Kira held still and looked at him with the direct, unhurried attention she had been giving him since the mountain. "You did it," he said quietly. "Whatever he asked you to do, you did it." Kira held his gaze. She did not move toward him the way a pet moved toward praise. She held the contact the way a working dog acknowledged a completed task. Present. Certain. Done. Ryan heard Marsh behind him, on the phone now, speaking quickly and specifically, in the language of people who were already 3 steps into managing what came next. 2 federal agents had gone back through to the lobby. The sounds of the clinic were returning around them, the normal rhythms of a building coming back to itself. He sat down on the floor next to Sarah. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then Sarah said, "He said she would find the right person." Ryan looked at her. "James, in the recording, the last thing he says before he ends it." "I didn't know that until just now." She kept her eyes on the middle distance, working through something. "He said, if Kira is alive and someone found this, it means she chose correctly. She always does." Ryan thought about Zeus pressing against his cage in the back of the cruiser on a mountain highway. The 4 minutes of sustained urgency that had made Ryan slow down instead of drive past. A chain post in frozen ground. A dog that had stayed for 2 nights when leaving would have been easier. He thought about how close he had come to not stopping. "She didn't choose me," Ryan said. "Zeus chose her." Sarah looked at him. Something in her expression broke open just slightly. The first fully unguarded moment he had seen from her since she regained consciousness. "That might be the same thing," she said. Marsh came back and crouched beside them. "Sarah, I need you transferred to a secured medical facility within the hour. You'll be under federal protection from this point forward." She paused. "The 2 men in the parking lot are being processed. 3 additional individuals connected to the contractor network are being picked up in Denver as we speak, based on the financial records." She looked at Ryan. "The card you preserved tonight is the cornerstone of a federal prosecution that has been trying to build for 2 years without a primary source." "James Weir is the primary source," Ryan said. "Yes," Marsh said. "He is." Sarah stood up, slowly. With Kira beside her, and her ribs still aching, and the expression of someone who had been holding a weight for 14 months and was only now beginning to understand what it would feel like to put it down. "His family," she said to Marsh. "His wife and his son. They were told it was an accident." "I know," Marsh said. "They need to know the truth before any of this becomes public. That is not negotiable." Marsh met her eyes. "That call is being made tonight." Sarah nodded once. Ryan stood and looked at Kira one more time. The dog was watching him with the same steady attention she had given him since the moment he opened the cruiser door and said, "Get in," and she had jumped in without hesitation. James Weir had sewn something into a collar and trusted a dog with it, and the dog had carried it through everything the world had thrown at her, and she had pressed her body against a dying woman in the snow and refused to leave. And she had held her position in a doorway for 6 hours, and she had looked at a young patrol officer in a supply corridor and decided he was worth trusting. Ryan reached out and put his hand flat on Kira's back. She leaned into it, just slightly, just enough. That was the moment Ryan understood that whatever happened next, whatever the federal process produced, or the prosecutors built, or the headlines eventually said, the most important decision of this entire night had been made by a dog on a mountain road who had chosen correctly, the way she always did. Sarah was transferred before sunrise. Ryan stood in the ambulance bay and watched the federal vehicle pull out with Marsh in the passenger seat and 2 agents behind Sarah and Kira in the back. Sarah did not wave. She looked through the window as the vehicle passed and held eye contact with Ryan for exactly the length of time it took the vehicle to clear the bay entrance. That was enough. That was everything that needed to be said between 2 people who had spent a night holding something together that neither of them had been prepared for. Ryan stood there after the taillights disappeared and breathed the cold air and felt the particular emptiness of a situation that had been at full intensity for 6 hours, suddenly going quiet. Zeus was beside him. He had brought the dog out of the cruiser once the clinic was secured, and Zeus had done a slow circuit of the corridor, nose working every surface Kira had touched, processing the entire night in the methodical way dogs process things they needed to understand. Then he had come back and sat beside Ryan, and had not moved since. Ryan put his hand on the dog's head. "Good job tonight," he said. Zeus leaned against his leg. They drove back up the mountain as the sun came up. Not because Ryan had been asked to, not because protocol required it, because he needed to see the place again in daylight. He needed to stand where she had been and understand the full shape of what had happened there. He found the post hole easily. The toe strap had torn it free at an angle that left a clean mark in the frozen ground. The chain was still there, half buried by overnight snowfall, the padlock frozen solid. Ryan crouched beside it and looked at it for a long moment. 2 nights. Sarah Voss had been chained here for 2 nights. In this cold, with injuries already on her from wherever they had held her before. And Kira had stayed pressed against her for every hour of it, sharing the only heat either of them had, refusing to leave, carrying 14 months of a dead man's evidence and a living woman's survival on the same small body. Ryan stood up. He took one photograph of the site for the report. Then he walked back to the cruiser and drove down the mountain and started writing the most important incident report of his career. The federal case moved fast after that, faster than Ryan had expected, which told him that Marsh and her team had been building towards something for a long time, and the micro SD card had been the final piece that made everything else load-bearing. Within 72 hours of that night, 3 individuals connected to the contractor network were in federal custody. Within a week, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, whose voice was on the recording, was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, which in federal language meant the decision about what came next was already made, and the process was simply being followed in the correct order. Ryan learned this not from news coverage, but from a text message Marsh sent him on a Tuesday afternoon that said, "The recording held. All 4 financial names confirmed. You'll be called to testify. Stay available." He replied with 2 words. "Understood. Standing by." He did not hear from Sarah directly for 3 weeks. When she called, it was on a Sunday morning. Ryan was running with Zeus on the county road behind his house, the two of them doing the easy pace they fell into on off days, the rhythm that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the fact that they were together and moving, and the air was cold and clean. He stopped when he saw her name on the screen. "Voss," he said. "Cole." Her voice was stronger than it had been in the clinic, steadier in a way that was not performance. It was the voice of someone who had been through the machinery of federal protection and deposition, and the grinding process of being believed by people with the authority to act on it, and who had come out the other side, intact. "How are the ribs?" he asked. "Healed, mostly." A pause. "I testified for 9 hours last week." "Marsh told me." "She told me you're being called in next month." "I know." A brief silence. Not uncomfortable. The kind that existed between people who had been through something together and did not need to fill every gap. "James's wife," Sarah said. "Her name is Carol. She came to the deposition. She sat in the back of the room the entire 9 hours." Her voice shifted slightly. "She brought their son. He's 9 now. His name is Marcus." Ryan stopped walking. Zeus circled back and sat beside him. "Carol asked me what Kira looked like when I described how James had hidden the card in the collar. She wanted to know if Kira had been okay, if she had been taken care of." Sarah paused. "I told her about the 2 nights in the blizzard, about what Kira had done. Carol didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, 'That sounds like James. He always trusted the right ones.'" Ryan felt something press against the inside of his chest. The specific weight of a person's life reduced to its truest sentence by the person who knew them best. "Is Kira with you?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. Actually," Sarah said, "that's partly why I'm calling." She paused. "Ryan, Kira's record has been corrected. The KIA designation was officially reversed by the DoD 2 days ago. She has been issued a formal service commendation in James's name. The paperwork went through yesterday." Another pause. "Which means her status is now officially active. And active working dogs require a designated handler." Ryan understood where she was going before she finished the sentence. "Sarah," he said, "you're her handler." "I'm being redeployed in 6 weeks," she said. "Classified assignment. I can't take her where I'm going." She stopped. "I have been asked to designate a permanent civilian handler for Kira's retirement placement. Someone with law enforcement credentials, canine experience, and a documented relationship with the animal." Ryan looked at Zeus sitting beside him in the road. "You're asking me?" he said. "Marsh suggested it," Sarah said. "I agreed. But I wanted to ask you directly, not through paperwork." Zeus was watching him with the patient attention of a dog waiting for the next direction. Ryan thought about Zeus pressing against that cage door on the mountain highway. 4 minutes of low, sustained urgency that had changed everything. He thought about Kira in the passenger seat, sitting upright, reading the road. He thought about the way the 2 dogs had watched each other through the cage divider the entire drive down the mountain. Not aggressive, not uncertain, just 2 working animals acknowledging each other across the dark. "Yes," Ryan said. "Tell me what I need to sign." Kira arrived on a Wednesday morning. Marsh handled the transport personally, which Ryan had not expected and which told him more about how Marsh felt about this particular outcome than anything she had said directly. She pulled up to his house and opened the back door, and Kira stepped out and stood on the gravel driveway and looked around at the property with the careful, systematic gaze of an animal taking inventory of a new space. Zeus came out the front door. The 2 dogs looked at each other across 6 feet of gravel. Ryan and Marsh stood on opposite sides of the driveway and said nothing. Zeus took 3 steps forward. Kira held still. Zeus stopped 2 feet away and dropped his head slightly, which in dog language meant something specific and important. Kira raised her head and touched her nose briefly to Zeus's, and then stepped past him toward the front door of the house with the calm confidence of an animal who had made a decision and was acting on it. Zeus turned and followed her inside. Marsh looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at the open front door. "That took about 8 seconds," Marsh said. "He's been waiting for a partner his whole life," Ryan said. "He just didn't know what she looked like yet." Marsh smiled. It was brief and genuine. She handed him the transfer documentation, shook his hand, and got back in her vehicle. Ryan went inside. Kira had already found the spot she wanted, a place near the window where the morning light came through at a low angle and the sightlines to both doors were clear. She had settled there with the self-possessed certainty of a dog who had slept in enough uncertain places to recognize a good one when she found it. Zeus lay down beside her without being invited. Ryan stood in the doorway and looked at them. He thought about the phone call 6 weeks later, when Sarah called from an undisclosed location with a voice that was quiet and contained, but warm underneath it, to tell him that the federal indictment had been formally filed, and the names attached to it were public, and James Weir's name was in the opening paragraph of the complaint. Not as a victim, not as a footnote, but as the originating investigator whose evidence formed the evidentiary foundation of the case. She said, "He did it. Even after everything, he did it." Ryan said, "You did it. You kept her safe." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "We both did." He thought about the Sunday 3 months after that, when Carol Weir drove up from Denver with Marcus in the passenger seat and knocked on Ryan's door. Marcus was 9 years old and had his father's eyes and a seriousness about him that belonged to children who had been handed more weight than children should carry, and had found a way to carry it anyway. Ryan brought both dogs to the front yard. Marcus crouched down in front of Kira and looked at her for a long moment without speaking. Kira held still. She did not push forward. She did not retreat. She sat in front of this boy whose father she had been partnered with and let him look at her for as long as he needed to. Then Marcus reached out and touched the side of her face very gently with both hands. "She remembers him," Marcus said. Not a question. Ryan crouched beside the boy. "Yes," he said, "I believe she does." Marcus pressed his forehead against Kira's, the way Sarah had done in the treatment room on the night it all began. And Kira held that contact without moving, steady and present, the way she had always held contact with the people she had decided mattered. Carol stood a few feet back and watched her son, and Ryan did not look at her face directly, because some moments were not meant to be witnessed and were only meant to be given space. He thought about all of it while he stood in his doorway, looking at 2 German shepherds asleep in the morning light. He thought about a blizzard on a mountain highway, and 4 minutes of a dog pressing against a cage door. About a chain driven into frozen ground. About a woman who had said, "Don't let them find," with her last available breath. And a dog who had stayed 2 nights in the cold because she understood that leaving was not an option. He thought about James Weir sitting alone the night before he died, sewing something into a collar with careful hands, trusting that what he hid would find the right person, trusting a dog to carry it through everything the world could produce, trusting that somewhere, on some road, in some storm, someone would slow down instead of drive past. Ryan looked at Kira. She opened her eyes and looked back at him across the room. Direct, calm. The same gaze she had given him since the mountain. The gaze of an animal that had chosen correctly and knew it and was simply confirming the choice every day. He had stopped on a highway because his dog would not let him keep driving. A woman was alive because a dog would not leave her side. A dead man's truth had survived 14 months and 3 men and 2 nights in a blizzard because an animal understood that some things were worth protecting with everything you had. There was a word for that. Ryan had heard people reach for different ones over the weeks since that night. Courage, loyalty, faith. None of them were wrong. None of them were complete. He walked to the window and sat down on the floor between the 2 dogs. Zeus put his head in Ryan's lap immediately. Kira shifted and pressed her back against Ryan's left side and looked at the window. Outside, the mountain road was quiet and open and clean. What the storm tried to bury, loyalty refused to surrender. What the powerful tried to silence, one honest man refused to abandon. What the world listed as gone, a dog carried home. And what one young officer almost drove past became the night that reminded an entire country that the truth does not die when it is hidden. It waits. It finds the right hands, and it always, always comes home.